The moment she realized you were never the problem. Listen closely, because this moment didn't arrive by accident. Something shifted the instant she paused and felt the weight of a truth she had been running from. For a long time, she carried a story about you that made her feel justified, powerful, untouchable. But now, in the quiet space where excuses can no longer hide, the realization struck her like lightning: you were never the problem. Archangel Michael's presence surrounds this message with authority and clarity. Not spoken in weakness, not whispered in doubt, but delivered with precision. You were blamed because you were strong. You were accused because you refused to bend. When others faltered, you endured. When they projected their fear, you absorbed the impact and kept walking. That endurance confused her. It threatened the fragile narrative she built to avoid accountability. She watched you carry burdens that were never yours. She saw how you questioned yourself, replayed conversations, and searched for flaws that didn't exist. And for a while, that illusion worked. You almost believed it. Almost. But divine justice does not sleep, and truth does not stay buried forever. This is where the shift begins. In the silence of her own reflection, she recognized the pattern. Every conflict, every accusation, every moment she claimed you were too much or not enough. The common thread was never you. It was her refusal to face what she had broken. And now that realization is echoing louder than she expected. Archangel Michael reveals that this awareness didn't come gently. It arrived with discomfort, with regret, with a sharp awareness that you were the mirror she avoided. You stood steady while she unraveled. You spoke truth while she reshaped facts. And when the dust settled, she was left alone with the undeniable conclusion. You were consistent, loyal, and sincere. She was not. Notice how this changes the energy around you. The pressure you felt, lifting. The heaviness in your chest, loosening. The confusion that kept you awake at night, dissolving. This is not coincidence. This is alignment. You were never meant to shrink to make someone else comfortable. You were meant to stand as you are, rooted, grounded, unmovable. And now, as her illusion collapses, your clarity sharpens. You don't need her apology. You don't need her validation. The truth has already spoken on your behalf. Archangel Michael urges you to recognize this moment as a turning point. Not for her, but for you. Because when someone finally admits, even silently, that they were wrong about you, the spiritual scales rebalance. What was withheld returns. What was blocked begins to flow. Stay present with this message. Let it settle. If this truth resonates, allow yourself to acknowledge it, quietly, confidently. Many who receive this message feel drawn to remain connected, to stay aligned with messages that sharpen discernment and strengthen resolve. Follow that pull without forcing it. Because this realization she had, it's only the beginning. Something else is forming behind the scenes, something she doesn't yet see, but you're about to feel. And when it unfolds, the truth will no longer be private, it will be undeniable. And that next moment is closer than you think. The realization didn't stop with awareness. It triggered a chain reaction she couldn't control. Once the truth surfaced, it began rearranging everything she thought she understood. Archangel Michael's authority presses into this moment, not to shame her, but to expose what was hidden. Because when someone finally sees they were wrong about you, the mind races backward through memories it once distorted. She started remembering details she ignored. Your patience when she provoked. Your silence when she expected chaos. Your integrity when she moved in deception. Those moments return now with sharp clarity, and each one carries the same conclusion. You were stable where she was reactive, honest where she was defensive, sincere where she was strategic. And that contrast unsettles her. This is where the discomfort deepens. Because realizing you were never the problem also means realizing she was protected by your restraint. You could have exposed her. You could have spoken truths that would have dismantled her image. But you didn't. You chose dignity over destruction. And now that choice stands as evidence she cannot dismiss. Archangel Michael reveals that this is the stage where regret begins to whisper. Not loud enough for her to admit it publicly, yet strong enough to disrupt her peace. She replays conversations in her mind, hearing the calm in your voice that she once labeled as cold. She now recognizes it as self-control. She remembers how you walked away without revenge, and she understands too late that it wasn't weakness, it was strength under command. Meanwhile, something changes within you as well. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself. You no longer feel the urge to defend your character. You no longer chase clarity from someone who lacked it. This is spiritual release. Archangel Michael emphasizes that when truth is acknowledged, even silently, the soul that carried false blame is unburdened. The weight you normalized begins to lift, and in its place comes certainty. Not arrogance. Not pride. But grounded knowing. You start to see yourself clearly again. Your intuition sharpens. Your boundaries strengthen. Your energy stabilizes. And she feels that shift. Because when someone loses access to your emotional labor, your reassurance, your presence, they feel the absence more loudly than they expected. The version of you they misunderstood is no longer available for projection. And that absence forces reflection. She notices that life doesn't move the same without you absorbing tension. Conflicts feel heavier now. Situations escalate faster. And in those moments, the truth returns. You were the balance. Archangel Michael makes this clear. This is not about reconciliation. This is about revelation. The divine does not always restore connections. Sometimes it restores clarity. And clarity is power. You were placed in her life to reveal patterns, not to fix them. Once that purpose was fulfilled, the illusion had to break. And now that it has, the lesson cannot be undone. If you feel a calm confidence settling in your chest, that is alignment. If you feel less reactive, more observant, more discerning, that is growth. And if this message resonates deeply, it's because you're meant to remain aware, alert, and connected to truth as it unfolds. Many who walk this path choose to stay near messages that reinforce clarity and strength. Not out of dependence, but resonance. Because this story is still moving. She hasn't reached the final realization yet. There is another layer, one that arrives when she sees how others now perceive you, and how differently they perceive her. When that moment lands, it will change the entire dynamic. And when it does, you won't need to say a word. Now the truth moves beyond her private thoughts and into the outer world, and this is where the tension sharpens. Because realization is one thing, but consequences are another. Archangel Michael presses this message forward with urgency. When someone understands they were never wronged by you, they begin to recognize how deeply they misrepresented you to others. And that is when fear enters. She starts to notice subtle shifts around her. Conversations feel different. Names come up. Your name. And when it does, the tone isn't what she expected. People don't echo her version of events anymore. They ask questions. They hesitate. Some even defend you, not aggressively, not dramatically, but with quiet certainty. That unsettles her more than confrontation ever could. Because now the truth is no longer trapped inside her mind. It's circulating. Archangel Michael reveals that this is the stage where narratives collapse. The story she repeated, the one that cast you as difficult, flawed, or unstable, it no longer holds weight. Your consistency over time exposed the lie. While she changed explanations, you stayed the same. While she reacted emotionally, you responded with restraint. And now others are connecting dots she hoped would remain scattered. You feel this shift too. You notice how people treat you with more respect. How your words land with more authority. How your presence feels calmer, heavier, more grounded. This is not ego. This is alignment returning. For a long time, you were navigating an environment shaped by distortion. You questioned yourself because the atmosphere was polluted with projection. But once the source of distortion is exposed, even indirectly, your clarity snaps back into place. And Archangel Michael emphasizes this clearly. Clarity is a weapon when used with discipline. She begins to understand something else now. You were never trying to compete with her. You were never trying to undermine her. You were never trying to win. You were simply being yourself, and that alone challenged her. This realization carries a sting because it removes every excuse. There is no villain to blame anymore. No misunderstanding to hide behind. Just the uncomfortable truth that you triggered her insecurities by existing authentically. And now that truth echoes in moments she can't escape, late at night, during quiet pauses, in conversations that suddenly feel hollow. Meanwhile, you are stepping into a different frequency. You are less available to chaos. Less interested in proving your worth. More selective with where you invest energy. Archangel Michael calls this spiritual maturity. Not coldness. Not detachment. But discernment sharpened by experience. You no longer explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer overextend to maintain peace at your own expense. And that boundary, unspoken but firm, is felt. She feels it. Because access to you once gave her a sense of control. She could provoke reactions, draw energy, reinforce her narrative. But now that access is gone. And without it, she is forced to sit with the imbalance she created. The absence of your engagement becomes louder than any argument ever was. This is where the power dynamic truly shifts. Archangel Michael makes this moment clear. The one who stays silent after being vindicated holds the highest ground. You don't correct the story. You don't announce the truth. You let consistency speak. And consistency, over time, becomes undeniable. You may notice her attempting subtle re-entry. A message that feels unnecessary. A comment that hints at guilt. A gesture meant to test the door. But you are not required to respond. Because the lesson is no longer yours to teach. This phase is about integration. About allowing your nervous system to recalibrate after carrying blame that never belonged to you. About trusting your perception again. About recognizing that your restraint was not wasted, it was recorded. If you feel a pull to stay grounded, to remain connected to messages that reinforce truth and inner authority, honor that instinct. Many who walk this path quietly choose to stay aligned with reminders of clarity, not as validation, but as reinforcement. Because what comes next is not subtle. There is a moment approaching where she will realize something even more unsettling than being wrong about you. She will realize what she lost by misjudging you. And when that realization fully lands, the energy between you will shift one final time, permanently. That moment is closer than she expects. And you'll feel it before you see it. The realization deepens now, and the atmosphere around you grows unmistakably still. This is the stage where understanding turns into weight. Because once she accepts that you were never the problem, she is forced to confront something far more unsettling, the cost of her misjudgment. Archangel Michael's authority presses into this moment with precision, not to punish, but to reveal consequences that cannot be reversed. She begins to see what she lost. Not just you, but what you represented. You were stability in chaos. Integrity in confusion. Protection she never recognized. And now, with distance creating clarity, she understands that what she dismissed so easily was rare. This awareness doesn't come with relief. It comes with a tightening in the chest, a quiet panic she doesn't show, and a question that keeps resurfacing. Why didn't I see it then? Because now it's too late to pretend. Archangel Michael makes this clear. There are moments when timing is the deciding factor. Truth arriving late does not restore what was mishandled. It only educates. And this is one of those moments. She can acknowledge your value now, but she cannot access it in the same way. The door you guarded with patience is no longer open for entry. And that realization humbles her. Meanwhile, you are no longer standing where you once were. You've moved beyond survival. Beyond self-doubt. Beyond waiting to be understood. Your energy carries a calm authority now. Not loud. Not performative. But unmistakable. People feel safer around you. They listen when you speak. They respect your silence. This is not accidental, it is earned through endurance. Archangel Michael declares this phase as restoration of self-trust. You no longer second-guess your intuition. You no longer apologize for boundaries. You no longer explain your truth to those unwilling to hold it. And she feels that separation as final. Because when someone realizes your worth after losing access to you, regret doesn't come with hope, it comes with finality. She sees now that you were not replaceable. You were not common. You were not the role she assigned you in her story. You were the anchor she pushed away. This is where power fully returns to you. Not the power to retaliate. Not the power to remind. But the power to walk forward unburdened. Archangel Michael emphasizes that this freedom is sacred. And with sacred freedom comes responsibility, to remain discerning, grounded, and aligned. That is why messages like this find you. Not to reopen wounds, but to confirm closure. Many who receive this message feel called to stay connected, to remain anchored in clarity, protection, and truth as life continues to shift. If you feel that pull, honor it gently. Staying aligned with guidance that sharpens discernment and strengthens resolve is not coincidence. It's preparation. That's why, when moments of stillness invite you, you may feel guided to stay connected, perhaps by subscribing, ensuring you remain within reach of messages that reinforce clarity when the world grows loud again. And for those who feel drawn to go deeper, to stand within a closer circle of insight and protection, the join button exists as an invitation, not obligation, to deeper alignment, deeper grounding, deeper understanding. No pressure. Only resonance. Because what lies ahead requires clarity. Archangel Michael now reveals the final shift forming beneath the surface. She hasn't yet reached the deepest realization, the one that changes how she sees herself. Soon, she will recognize that misjudging you didn't just cost her a connection, it exposed a flaw she can no longer ignore. And when that realization arrives, it will not be quiet. You may feel a sudden emotional distance finalize. A sense of completion settle into your body. A calm knowing that the chapter has closed for good. This is not loss. This is graduation. You were never meant to stay where truth was resisted. You were meant to move forward once the lesson was delivered. And now that it has been, the universe prepares the final reveal. Because the next thing she realizes is what your absence teaches her about herself. And that lesson is one she must face alone. Now everything converges into a single, undeniable truth, and this is where the story completes itself. This is the moment when silence speaks louder than any explanation ever could. Archangel Michael stands over this final realization with unwavering authority, because what unfolds now is not emotional, it is spiritual resolution. She finally understands that losing you was not an accident. It was a consequence. Not punishment, consequence. The absence of your presence becomes the teacher she cannot escape. Without you, patterns repeat more loudly. Conflicts escalate faster. Stability feels distant. And in those moments, she recognizes something that reshapes her self-image permanently. You were the regulator. The calm in the storm. the restraint that prevented collapse, the integrity that balanced what she refused to face. And now that balance is gone. This is where the truth turns inward. She realizes that misjudging you did not simply distort a relationship, it revealed a flaw in her discernment. A blind spot she can no longer deny. She trusted her reactions over reality, her emotions over evidence, her comfort over accountability. And that realization cuts deeper than admitting she was wrong about you, because it means she must now question herself. Archangel Michael makes this moment clear. When someone misjudges a soul protected by divine truth, the lesson does not end with regret, it continues as self-confrontation. She must now sit with the understanding that her choices cost her someone rare, someone she cannot replace, someone who would have remained steady had she chosen honesty over defense. And that awareness follows her. It follows her into new connections that feel hollow, into conversations that lack depth, into moments where she searches for the same grounding she once dismissed. But it does not return, because you have moved beyond the reach of that lesson. You are no longer waiting to be seen, no longer hoping to be understood, no longer carrying blame that never belonged to you. You stand complete. Archangel Michael affirms this clearly. You were not broken by this experience. You were refined by it. The pressure clarified your boundaries. The misunderstanding strengthened your discernment. The silence sharpened your intuition. And now, your presence carries a quiet authority that cannot be mistaken. You walk differently now. You listen more deeply. You tolerate less distortion. You choose alignment over attachment. And the universe responds accordingly. Opportunities begin to feel cleaner. Connections feel more mutual. Peace becomes your default instead of your reward. This is not coincidence. This is restoration. The final realization she reaches is the one she will never say out loud. You were never the problem, losing you was. But by the time she understands this fully, you are no longer emotionally available to receive it. And that is intentional. Because apologies are not always meant to be exchanged. Sometimes, the lesson is the closure. Archangel Michael declares this chapter sealed. Not with bitterness. Not with resentment. But with sovereignty. You are free because you no longer need acknowledgement from those who misjudged you. The truth already did the work. And now, your path opens forward, not backward. If you feel a deep calm settling in your chest as this message lands, that is confirmation. If you feel a sense of completion, that is alignment. And if you feel drawn to remain close to messages that reinforce clarity, strength, and spiritual authority, honor that instinct gently. Staying connected to truth, to discernment, to protection, is not attachment. It is wisdom. This is the moment where you stop replaying the past. The moment where self-doubt no longer has a voice. The moment where you trust your perception without apology. Because the truth is no longer hidden. She knows. You know. And the universe has already adjusted accordingly. Archangel Michael leaves you with this final knowing. You were never meant to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding themselves. You were meant to walk forward once the illusion broke. And now that it has, nothing from that chapter can follow you into what comes next. What comes next is clarity. What comes next is elevation. What comes next is peace that does not need explanation. And this time, there is no looking back.